These are the most interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. A 1910 studio postcard with the inscription Kiko and Sulu from Zanzibar is a common souvenir from tour shows of that era. In the early 1900s, in Southeast Asia, wooden mouthguards and hand tools were used to shape front teeth in the open air. Many communities in Indonesia used to file or paint their teeth to emphasize beauty, status, or adulthood. Rooftop training for 2 security hires in Detroit, 1929, with an officer supervising the drill. Many big buildings added on-site protection that year, so firms began formal practice sessions like this.
Harry Houdini stages an escape stunt, tied with ropes and chains against a large machinery wheel in the 1910s. He used public challenges like this to prove his skill and pull big crowds to his theater shows.
Stage performers Nellie Lane and Major Might pose for a 1922 publicity photo, styled like a playful wedding scene from a touring act. Cards like this were sold after shows across the vaudeville circuit and kept as souvenirs. Boston pitcher Charles Old Hoss Radbourne flashes a rude hand sign during a team photo in 1886, likely the earliest recorded image of that gesture. It was taken with the Boston Bean Eaters, the club later known as the Braves, proving ballpark mischief is very old. Queen Elizabeth II studies a carved mask from Ceylon during a 1962 museum visit, its fiber ties and open eye socket giving it a striking look. Fruit of Islam members sit in formation while Elijah Muhammad delivers a speech in 1975. Their uniforms, gloves, and matching caps show the disciplined image the Nation of Islam used at large events. John Grizzly Adams sits for a studio portrait in 1856 with one of the bears he trained for shows in California. His frontier animal acts and small menagerie later inspired books and a television series. Russia tested the Lebedenko Tsar tank in 1915, a tricycle-style vehicle with 2 front wheels about 9 meters tall and a crew of roughly 15. In trials, it sank into soft ground, failed to move as planned, and was left on site without entering service. The 1904 St. Louis Olympic Marathon turned into chaos, with one runner riding part of the course in a car before officials caught it. The winner was given a then-legal stimulant and helped to the line, while Cuban runner Felix Carvajal even stopped for an hour-long nap after a mid-race mishap. Ali Mahmoud served in the Austro-Hungarian army during World War I, remembered as the only black soldier in its ranks. He was first refused as a foreign national, but kept applying until accepted. Francis Perkins witnessed the 1911 Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in New York, a disaster that cost 146 workers their lives and exposed unsafe exits and locked doors. She later became the first female U.S. Secretary of Labor and drove major reforms in fire codes. A Borden's milk delivery rig parks at the curb, the driver in uniform posing beside a streamlined tanker. These branded trucks kept city milk cold in transit and doubled as rolling ads for the company. 2 young players test a giant Bluebird harmonica in a Regent Street music shop in London, 1938. Oversized display models like this drew crowds and showed that each reed bank worked just like a normal mouth organ. College dorm life in the 1970s meant shared hallway payphones and strict time limits, often posted by the phone. Students lined up after evening quiet hours to make long-distance calls home before rates went up at night. A 1980 UK press photo shows Peter Mayhew, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Kenny Baker lined up between shoots for The Empire Strikes Back. Off-camera, Fisher kept spirits high with playful pranks, a light counterpoint to the film's serious tone. Students at James A. Garfield High School in Los Angeles punch a time clock to begin shifts at the school's airplane shop on December 10, 1943. Many U.S. schools ran training plants like this, so teens could build parts and learn skills needed by local factories. Walt Disney explains his Florida project in 1966, showing Epcot as a planned city with a hub-and-spoke layout, a transit loop, and homes around the edge. His goal was an experimental prototype community of tomorrow. Russian soldiers on the Eastern Front wave across the line in 1917 during a lull in fighting. Small gestures like this became more common that year as morale sank and revolution neared. In 1960, the battleship HMS Vanguard, Britain's last battleship, grounded beside the Still and West pub at Portsmouth while tugs towed her to the breakers. Crowds watched as she was freed on the tide and continued her final trip to scrap. Crews carve a rail line through solid granite for the Snowy Mountains hydro tunnels in Australia, 1963. The project cut over 100 kilometers of tunnels and helped power fast-growing post-war cities. Charles Manson stands for his initial booking photo in Los Angeles in 1969, wearing fringed buckskin clothes. The image was taken during the high-profile Tate LaBianca case that dominated national news that year. Annie Chapman and John Chapman pose for a studio wedding portrait around May 1, 1869. 19 years later, Annie's name became tied to the Whitechapel case of 1888 as the second so-called canonical victim. Men read posters outside the National Association opposed to woman suffrage headquarters in 1914 as a woman looks on. The group claimed voting would hurt home life, but the 19th Amendment passed in 1920 and women gained the vote nationwide. German handlers and medics care for messenger dogs at a Hundelazarett, a dog hospital, in 1918. These dogs carried notes and small aid packs, so clinics cleaned paws, fixed strains, and sent them back to duty. Crown Prince Wilhelm, heir to the German throne, turns a 1915 troop inspection into a show with his plumed cap and hands-on-hips pose. These visits were staged for cameras to lift morale. Within a year, his Fifth Army faced the long fight at Verdun. Lizzie Magie shows her earlier idea, the landlord's game from 1904, which she designed to teach Henry George's single tax and the risks of land monopolies. In 1936, she posed with a Monopoly set after selling her patent for a small fee, while Charles Darrow became the public face. Rows of galvanized tubs and wringer washers line one of the first laundromats in Texas in the early 1940s. Customers rented a washer by the hour, brought their own soap, and attendants kept the hot water and boilers running. Stanley Kubrick watches Malcolm McDowell strapped into the Ludovico chair while filming A Clockwork Orange in 1971. A real eye doctor stood by to drip anesthetic and saline so the metal eye clamps could stay on safely. Students practice in a new home economics room at Chevy Chase High School in Bethesda, Maryland, 1935, each station with an electric range and tools. Classes like this taught cooking, nutrition, and budgeting skills that families used during the hard 1930s. A man sits under an early electric perm machine while reading the paper in 1925. The sealing unit used heated curlers and long wires to set waves, showing salon perms were not just for women. An overpacked car carries a family and their goods in 1939, one of many who left the plains after drought and dust storms ruined crops. About 400,000 people traveled west along Route 66, seeking farm work and a fresh start. Two women in the Lodz ghetto share a last kiss through a fence in the early 1940s. It captures a brief goodbye inside the sealed district under German occupation. Two shoppers stage a street demo comparing $1.34 in 1918 versus 1945 during wartime price controls. The 1945 cart lists Office of Price Administration ceiling prices, showing that the same amount could buy sugar, bread, oranges, milk, oatmeal, and coffee. In Athens in 1896, James Connolly won the triple jump and became the first American to take a gold medal of the modern games. He also earned medals in the high jump and the long jump that week. Recovery divers secure the Apollo 11 command module after splashdown in the Pacific on July 24, 1969. Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins waited in rafts and then entered quarantine, closing the first lunar landing mission. Adolf Hitler signs a photo for a Catholic sister during a public visit in the 1930s. The scene shows how his publicity stops drew onlookers years before the war. Charlie Chaplin playfully spars with heavyweight star Primo Carnera in 1930, turning a studio visit into a photo moment. The size contrast mirrors the comic boxing gags Chaplin loved to stage on screen. Unemployed men gather in Times Square in 1930 wearing placards with their trades and "will work for $1 a week." Public job marches like this appeared across U.S. cities as people searched for any paid work during the hard early 1930s. Titanic takes shape in Belfast in 1910, with 4 funnels rising over the massive hull in the Harland and Wolff yard. Months later, she would launch, then finish fitting out before her first and only voyage in 1912. A one-room tenement in New York, 1910, shows a mother and 2 children sharing a narrow space with a trunk stove and wash basins. Many families lived like this then. No indoor plumbing, little light, and rent paid for a room the size of a hallway. The Jacob Henry Mansion in Joliet, Illinois, dates to 1873, a grand Second Empire house built of local limestone with a tall mansard roof. Restored today as a landmark and event space, it shows how solid stone and care can carry a home across 150 years. An early U.S.-Mexico boundary monument stands in the desert soon after the 1848 treaty ended the war. Survey teams set marble obelisks along the new line, and cages like this deterred souvenir chipping and vandalism. Crews carve a 4-lane stretch of U.S. Route 66 through the Ozark Hills near Devil's Elbow, Missouri, in the late 1920s. Pneumatic drills and dump trucks cut and widened the grade to tame the sharp bends along the Big Piney River. A 1942 police notice in Brazil bans speaking German, Italian, or Japanese in public, ordering Portuguese only. Wartime rules under the Vargas government targeted immigrant communities, with penalties for breaking the order. Physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer fills the board during a 1960 talk at Kyoto University, explaining ideas in quantum fields and particles. After his 1954 security hearing, he traveled widely to teach and lecture, shaping a new generation of physicists. John Wayne shares a meal with U.S. service members at a base in the Philippines, 1958. He toured Pacific posts that year to lift morale between film projects. Boeing B-29. Superfortresses from the 73rd Bomb Wing fly past Mount Fuji in 1945 during long-range missions from the Marianas. The new 4-engine planes could cruise high, travel far, and carry a heavy load across the Pacific. Students pray over the ruins of Pantglas Junior School after the Aberfan disaster in Wales, 1966. A coal waste tip slid into the village and cost 144 lives, including 116 children, leading to strict new safety rules. 70-year-old Mr. Engelhardt stands in a canvas and brass diving suit at the Oostzaanergat in 1919. The tender controls his air hose and guide rope, the standard method for working divers in those years. Backup teacher Barbara Morgan watches the launch of Space Shuttle Challenger on January 28, 1986. 73 seconds later, the shuttle broke apart, and the nation watched in shock. H. Cook's headquarters saloon in Montana shows a classic 1900 back bar, mirror, chandelier, and shelves packed with bottles. The billiard table up front hints it doubled as the town's meeting room, where mail, news, and deals moved fast. Parker County, Texas, 1890s. This steam threshing rig broke a small timber bridge and sank into the creek bed, drawing the whole crew for a photo before the hard recovery. Heavy iron wheels and a full boiler often outweighed rural spans like this, a common hazard of early farm machines. At a Texas folk festival, 6-year-old Christopher Martin from Houston tries driving a rail spike into a demo track. Hands-on exhibits like this show how crews once set rails by hand with heavy mauls. Farm crew in Otero County, Colorado, poses with long heirloom watermelons in the 1910s, likely black diamond or Kolb gem grown in the Arkansas Valley. Rocky Ford growers were already shipping melons by rail nationwide, thanks to river irrigation and high-altitude sun. An American Coca-Cola ad from 1984 lines up portraits of historic rulers and says only one campaign conquered the world: advertising. It bragged about the brand's global reach in the 1980s, with the classic contour bottle used as a single symbol in more than 150 countries. Italian ace Francesco Baracca, who won dozens of victories in the First World War, poses with his Spad SM7, which depicts his emblem, a prancing horse. Ernest Hemingway stands on crutches in Milan in 1918, recovering after being injured while serving as a Red Cross ambulance driver on the Italian front. He later drew on this hospital stay and the people he met to shape the novel A Farewell to Arms. Before sailing for Antarctica in 1914, Shackleton's endurance team stocked up at South Georgia, where whaling stations like this supplied food and fuel. They bought meat and blubber scraps to feed 26 men and 61 sled dogs, a last stop before the ice closed in. Ruski Vityaz, built by Igor Sikorsky in 1913, was the world's first successful four-engine airplane and the largest of its day. Its design led straight to the Ilya Muromets planes of World War I, proving big multi-engine flight could work. A 1940 Finnish leaflet printed in Russian offers $10,000 and safe conduct to any Soviet pilot who lands a working plane and defects. Wartime flyers like this tried to lower enemy morale and capture intact aircraft without a fight. Las Vegas hotels in the early 1950s promoted sunrise viewing parties for Nevada test site nuclear tests about 100 kilometers away, even printing schedules in the paper. Bars mixed atomic cocktails, and tourists watched from rooftops until safety rules ended the promotions in the 1960s. Texas legend says Henry Ziegland survived when a bullet meant for him in 1893 lodged in a tree after grazing his face. About 20 years later, a dynamite blast to fell the tree supposedly sent the old slug back into him. Searchlights and flak traced the sky over Berlin during a Royal Air Force night raid in 1944, captured with a long exposure that turns bursts into glowing rings. Crews flew in waves guided by Pathfinder markers, a tactic that let bombers find targets through smoke and darkness. In 1915, San Diego hired rainmaker Charles Hatfield, who set up towers of pans and secret mixes near Morena Reservoir and promised rain for $10,000. A massive storm followed, dams failed, dozens of bridges washed out, and the city never paid him, calling it an act of nature. Swedish engineer Salomon August André and two teammates launched the hydrogen balloon Eagle in 1897 to reach the North Pole, but gas loss forced a landing on drifting ice after about 2 days. In 1961, the Berlin Wall went up with barbed wire that was soon replaced by concrete, splitting the city and separating families. In West Berlin, people lifted children for a look across and queued at viewing platforms to glimpse the east. In 1945, Warsaw lay in ruins only months after the 1944 uprising, with whole districts reduced to rubble. By January 1945, about 85% of the city's buildings were destroyed due to the uprising and the subsequent demolition of the city. Wendy's launched the Super Value menu in October 1989 with 9 items at 99 cents, promoted with choices like chili, hot baked potatoes, salads, Frosty, and the Junior Bacon Cheeseburger. The 99-cent deal became a staple through the 1990s. By 1940, Medal was advertised for period pain after a 1938 shift from a general headache and hiccup remedy, with the brand presented as a safer, non-narcotic option. Ads from that period list a price of 40 cents for 12 tablets in 1940. In the 1940s holiday rush, Macy's Herald Square was already a landmark that had moved to 34th Street in 1902 and helped define the season with Christmas window displays introduced in 1874. In 1938, Zenith introduced the Radio Nurse, the first electronic baby monitor, developed by company president Eugene MacDonald and designed by Isamu Noguchi as a bakelite receiver paired with a Guardian ear transmitter. From the 10th century to the early 20th century, foot binding in China reshaped girls' feet as a status and beauty ideal before reform campaigns and bans ended the custom. The prized golden lotus meant a foot about 3 inches long, roughly 7.5 centimeters. Built in 1552, the timber-framed Old Wellington Inn survived redevelopment by being jacked up onto concrete stilts in the 1970s, as seen here. After damage to nearby buildings in 1996, it was dismantled and rebuilt about 70 to 100 meters away in the new Shambles Square in 1999. On November 29, 1943, at the Tehran Conference, Winston Churchill presented Joseph Stalin with the Sword of Stalingrad. The 4-foot ceremonial blade, designed by Oxford professor R.M.Y. Gleadow, was decorated with inscriptions in Russian and English and decorated with a golden wire handle. In July 1942, Nikola Tesla met King Peter II of Yugoslavia in his room at the New Yorker Hotel in New York City. Tesla had lived at the New Yorker since 1934, and the young king recorded the visit in his diary during the war. In December 1956, New York police sappers seized a planted device from the Paramount Theater in Times Square during an explosion related to George Metesky. Earlier that month, a device went off at Brooklyn's Paramount Theater, prompting an intense police search across the city. In the 1890s in the United States, a blacksmith used a custom-made prosthetic to hold a tool that attached a hammer to his forearm, reflecting the practical design created for working people after losing an arm. Victorian surgical mechanics made levers out of metal and leather that gripped or mounted instruments. Jolly Mary, said to weigh about 280 kilograms, rides after winning the Big Girls contest at Luna Park. The image shows how early amusement parks held size-themed competitions to draw crowds. Young James Jimmy Stewart in the late 1930s, photographed before he left Hollywood for World War II service. He later flew missions as a U.S. Army Air Forces pilot and rose to Brigadier General in the Air Force Reserve. Karl Marx in a London studio portrait from the early 1870s, showing the era's formal hand-in-coat pose. This cabinet card turned leading thinkers into collectible prints shared across Europe. Las Vegas, August 26, 1965. Couples crowd a license office before Executive Order L1241 ends the deferment for newly married men. After midnight, childless men who married that day were treated the same as single men in draft selection. Werner von Braun in his Huntsville office at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, 1965, with scale models of U.S. launch vehicles. He led the Saturn V program that soon powered Apollo missions to the moon. Private Albert Cashier of the 95th Illinois Infantry, 1864, photographed during the Civil War. Born in Ireland as Jenny Hodgers, he enlisted as Albert and lived as a man for 53 years, receiving a veteran's pension until his death in 1915. McDonald's Cheddar Melt was a limited-time burger from the late 1980s, a quarter-pound beef patty with grilled onions and a cheddar sauce on a toasted light rye bun. It became a fan favorite and has resurfaced in a few regional comebacks over the years. A crowd in Berlin watches gas balloons lift off during a race in 1908. Balloon contests, including the Gordon Bennett Cup, turned Tempelhof and City Fields into early aviation stages for records and prestige. A chain gang in the American South, 1905. Prisoners in striped uniforms linked by ankle chains for road and camp work. Chain gangs were a common form of state prison labor in the early 20th century. Soviet conscript at a Moscow parade in 1940, photographed with a Mosin Nagant rifle and fixed bayonet. Red Square parades showcased large-scale mobilization as the USSR expanded its armed forces on the brink of the 1940s campaigns. Andrew Jackson at age 78 in an 1845 daguerreotype, one of the few photographs of the 7th U.S. president. Captured in his final year at the Hermitage, it links early photography to America's early leaders. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles-themed pizza cutter styled after Raphael's Sigh, sold as licensed Nickelodeon merchandise. Features a stainless steel wheel and comes in a pizza slice box for display or gifting. Gudauta, 1976. Photographer Sergo Edishirashvili captured Kapap Lazuria, said to be 137, walking with her 95-year-old son, Zukuri, in Abkhazia, Georgian SSR. Their ages were never officially verified, but the image became a symbol of Caucasus longevity in Soviet media. Office of A.Y. Kopp's factory in Alexandrovsk, photographed in 1911. The works began in the 1860s, making parts for farm machines. After nationalization, it became Kommunar, and later ZAZ, which launched the ZAZ 965 Zaporozhets in 1960. Anita Ekberg in a 1956 studio publicity photo, wearing an Eastern-style dance costume used for Hollywood roles of the time. The Swedish star had won Miss Sweden in 1951, signed with Universal, and would gain worldwide fame with La Dolce Vita in 1960. Britain, 1936. A Most Beautiful Eyes contest had entrants cover their faces, so judges scored only the eyes. These themed pageants were popular interwar publicity stunts for cinemas and cosmetics brands. Jean Piaget in his home office in 1979, surrounded by stacks of books and notes. The Swiss psychologist is known for his theory of cognitive development and decades of research on how children think. Martin County, the showman who popularized infant incubators, pictured with 2 premature babies at his exhibit in the early 1900s. His paid displays, about 25 cents admission, funded care and helped spur hospitals to adopt incubators. German officers captured at Stalingrad in early 1943 sit in heavy winter gear. The battle ended soon after and became a key turning point on the Eastern Front. American newlyweds pose on Moscow's Sparrow Hills in 1980, with Luzhniki Stadium behind them. Despite tense politics, tourism still flowed, and the city became their honeymoon backdrop. Mogadishu, 1993. A Somali woman hangs laundry between grounded, damaged planes at the city airport during the United Nations operation period. Everyday routine persisted, even as the city tried to rebuild after conflict. Sophia Loren during a costume fitting for the film Attila in 1954, an early role before her global fame. The team adjusts her gown for the character of Honoria, sister of a Roman emperor. Alaska's 1964 Good Friday earthquake reached magnitude 9.2, the strongest in United States history, and shook for about 4.5 minutes. The ground tore and shifted as some coastlines rose while others sank, tilting trees and breaking streets like this. Chernobyl nuclear power plant, 1990. Staff pass through full-body radiation control gates at the exit. 4 years after the 1986 accident, these routine checks logged exposure levels and helped track hotspots. Moscow, 1935. Crews dig the new metro with picks, shovels, and tip carts on narrow rails, carving the tunnels by hand. Within months, the first line opened with marble stations and mosaics, turning the underground into a showpiece of modern design. Late 1920s, advertisers pushed a new image for women by paying models to smoke in public and pose for photos like this. In 1929, PR pioneer Edward Bernays staged the Torches of Freedom March in New York, which helped make public smoking by women more accepted. World War I. A messenger dog wears a note tube on its collar, part of the network used when field phones failed. Trained to run between units by scent and memory, these dogs sped orders and often saved precious time. 1910. Doctors used high-frequency current devices, often called violet ray or early diathermy, to warm tissue and ease pain, skin issues, and muscle spasms. These gadgets were popular in clinics and even homes until tighter testing and regulation reduced their use. Zurich, 1948. A young circus acrobat sits backstage after an onstage accident during the show. Her still pose and faraway look reveal how life under the big top mixed bright lights with real risk. Ypres, Belgium, After World War I, the Cloth Hall and St. Martin's Cathedral lie in ruins from years of heavy artillery. A lone Allied soldier crosses the empty square, a stark reminder of how modern war erased whole streets. Soviet Bluebird search and rescue vehicle climbs a steep bank during trials. Built to reach landing sites of space crews, this amphibious 8-wheel machine could cross swamps, ice, and rivers. Ethel Granger, United Kingdom. After years of tight lacing, she reached a waist of 33 centimeters, 13 inches, using custom corsets. She and her husband carefully recorded the process, making her one of the most extreme documented cases in fashion history. 1938. Farmers used light wire beak guards on hens to reduce harmful pecking in flocks. The guard let birds eat and drink, but blocked hard jabs. An early behavior control tool before modern welfare rules. Oriel Governorate, 1908. A village couple poses on their wedding day in homespun dress, beaded headwear, and wide woven belts. The bride holds a family icon given before the church ceremony, a blessing meant to guard their new home. Samara, 1921. A worker and his family wait by a canvas shelter during the Volga famine, driven by drought and the post-war collapse. Relief trains and kitchens later reached the region, but millions across the Volga basin faced hunger and displacement. 1959. Early car phones let drivers talk on the road through a radio link, even though the set was heavy and took up the dash. It was a first step toward true mobile voice. Budapest, 1984. A blind couple walks with white canes while the mother carries their child, a quiet scene of everyday city life. In much of Eastern Europe then, few streets had tactile guides or audio signals, so routes were learned by memory and landmarks. New York, 1926. The Cosmopolitan Theater glows with jazz-age energy. Silent films, a live orchestra, and towering ads like the Camel billboard fill the square. Movie palaces like this turned a night at the cinema into a grand event for the city. Durham, North Carolina, 1939. Small farmers sleep on a warehouse floor while waiting for the next day's tobacco auction. To save travel costs, many stayed in town for days, guarding their crop and hoping for a price that could carry the farm through winter. Occupied Ukraine, 1942. A mother and daughter undergo a medical exam after replying to a German labor notice that promised pay and housing. Many such recruits, later called Ostarbeiter, were sent to factories in Germany under strict wartime controls. Osnabrück, April 7, 1945. Allied forces and locals help free Soviet forced laborers from basement shelters as the front reached the city. The scene shows stunned survivors receiving quick street-side aid moments after the area was secured. Late 1950s. A crane lowers a full concrete room block, the signature step of Khrushchevka prefab housing. Engineer Vitaly Lagutenko, grandfather of musician Ilya Lagutenko, led this program that moved millions from shared flats into their own homes. Leningrad, late 1980s. Anatoly Sobchak places a transatlantic call during a live demo of the new mobile service. Moments like this marked the shift from fixed lines to handheld phones in the country. World War I. Trained dogs wear special gas masks during drills as armies prepared for chemical alarms on the front. Many served as messengers, sentries, and first aid helpers, guiding medics to wounded handlers. New York Harbor, 1942. The French liner SS Normandy caught fire during conversion to the U.S. troopship Lafayette, took on water, and rolled onto her side at Pier 88. The loss ended the career of the fastest Atlantic liner of the 1930s and turned the pier into a vast salvage site. United Kingdom, 1941. A veteran strongman lifts a bar loaded with 2 Home Guard soldiers during a morale event. Such stunts were common at training fields and charity shows, a show of spirit on the home front. Mount Lowe Railway, California, early 1900s. An open-air electric car crosses the circular bridge, a wooden trestle that smoothed a sharp grade. The line opened in 1893 and became a popular tourist ride above Los Angeles. Emperor Alexander III of Russia, who ruled from 1881 to 1894, pictured in field dress. His era saw the annexation of the Merv Oasis in 1884, the Panjshir border crisis with Britain in 1885, and Russian control secured in the Pamir Highlands in the early 1890s. Thomas Edison's 1876 electric pen used a battery-driven needle to punch tiny holes in paper, making a stencil of your handwriting. A small press rolled ink through the stencil to produce thousands of copies, an early office copier before mimeographs and photocopiers. Designed from 1937 to 1939, the Antarctic Snow Cruiser was a giant diesel-electric vehicle for 5 people that even carried a small plane on its roof. Its smooth tires slipped on real snow, so it moved at walking speed and was soon left on the ice, later buried by storms. 1918. A U.S. dispatch rider sits on a Harley-Davidson, part of more than 20,000 Harleys and Indians sent to Europe. These bikes carried messages, maps, and medical supplies faster than horse patrols on rough roads. Hanoi, October 26, 1967. After his jet was shot down, U.S. pilot John McCain was pulled from Truk Bok Lake by local militia and residents. He was taken into custody and held as a prisoner of war until 1973. August 1946. A German-speaking girl waits in a transit camp in Czechoslovakia during the post-war expulsion of Sudeten Germans. Between 1945 and 1947, millions were transferred to Germany and Austria under Allied-approved population moves. This movable bookcase concealed the entrance to the secret annex, where Anne Frank and 7 others hid from July 1942 to August 1944, above Otto Frank's office. Built by carpenter Johannes Voskuil, it swung open like a door to mask the passage during checks. San Francisco, 1941. Helen Chan gives Sun Lum an "I am Chinese" pin, used to prevent mistaken identity as war tensions rose. Many Chinese Americans wore these badges in public during the early war period. 1962. President John F. Kennedy smokes a cigar at a formal event. The day before he signed the trade embargo on Cuba, he secured about 1,200 Cuban cigars for his staff collection. Eugen Sandow, the showman who popularized modern bodybuilding in the late 1800s, set measurements for the Grecian ideal and turned posing into a stage act. This 1880s portrait shows the physique that made him a global star and a fitness brand pioneer. Munich, 1924. After the failed beer hall uprising, Adolf Hitler was sentenced to 5 years, but served 9 months in Landsberg prison. He used the trial to gain attention and began writing his political book that later guided his movement. Egypt, 1859. Early crews dig the Suez Canal by hand with tip carts and narrow-gauge rails under the plan led by Ferdinand de Lesseps. 10 years later, in 1869, the canal opened and cut the sea route between Europe and Asia by thousands of miles. Finland, 1966. Women trained to drive trams, learning hands-on tasks like coupling cars, changing trolley poles, and climbing the front steps in uniform. Nordic cities began hiring more women for streetcar crews in the 1960s, pushing transit into the era of equal work. The Whirly-Pop stovetop popper uses a hand crank to turn stirrers so kernels heat evenly and do not burn. Sold since the 1980s, it can make about 6 quarts in 3 minutes with no electricity. Stiletto titanium framing hammer, a 15-ounce head that hits like a heavier steel hammer with less shock to the wrist. The open web handle and side nail puller keep it light and fast for everyday framing work. France, 1966. Early Auchan shoppers park outside one of the chain's first stores, launched in 1961 by Gérard Moulier. The name comes from the Auchan district in Roubaix, and the famous bird logo would only arrive in 1983. Texas, 1974. Director Tobe Hooper's crew rests on the farmhouse steps with Gunnar Hansen in the mask and apron and the prop saw at his boots. Shot on a tiny budget in scorching heat, costumes were never laundered for continuity, giving the film its raw look and a set famous for its smell. Leningrad, 1944. Citizens dig the Bronze Horseman free from its sand and timber bunker, built to shield Peter the Great's monument during the 872-day siege. Uncovering the statue became a public sign that the city had endured and life was restarting. Long before Russian and Japanese rule, the Kuril Islands were Ainu land. The name likely comes from the Ainu word kur, or kuru, meaning person, which Russians rendered as Kuril. Their spiral pattern robes and the bear ceremony marked a seafaring culture trading across Hokkaido, Sakhalin, and Kamchatka. Bournemouth, 1944. A woman sunbathes beside barbed wire defenses that lined Britain's beaches against a feared invasion. Even as D-Day neared, seaside towns kept the fencing up, so civilians learned to relax between signs and coils. This classic Fisher-Price play family farm traces back to 1968, with barn doors that moo, using a tiny bellows when you open them. The silo doubles as storage, and the sturdy older models often outlast several generations of play. 19th century inkstand. One pot held ink, the other held fine sand or powder to dry fresh writing before blotting paper became common. The tray's lip is a pen rest, and the ornate feet kept spills off the table. Chernobyl, 1986. Liquidators ride a shuttle bus in cotton suits and masks, heading for short shifts measured by dosimeters to limit exposure. Hundreds of thousands of workers, soldiers, engineers, miners, took turns clearing debris and sealing the plant to stabilize the site. November 1941. The Soviet Union introduced a childlessness tax. Most childless men aged 20 to 50 and married childless women 20 to 45 paid 6% of their wages. It stayed in law into the early 1990s, with exemptions added for servicemen, disabled people, students, and later parents of one child. A young royal couple lounges in soft light, a rare candid style for early 1980s tours when images were usually formal and staged. Such relaxed frames reshaped how the public saw royalty, more human, more modern, and fueled a new era of global celebrity. 1870s ring pistol, nicknamed the Perfect Protector, hit a tiny multi-shot barrel on a band and fired 3mm rounds with a squeeze of the hand. Sold as discreet self-defense jewelry, it came in a velvet case with reload tools, like a miniature screwdriver. Henry Ford and Thomas Edison paused during their famed Vagabonds road trip in 1923, when the industrial duo turned camping into a moving showcase of new gadgets and cars. Years earlier, Ford worked for Edison's electric company, and Edison's encouragement helped steer him toward the gasoline car that reshaped mass travel. This is a mid-century electric desk lighter disguised as a tiny boat statue. Plug it in, and the base heats up. Flip it upside down to touch the hot plate and light a cigarette, then set it back as a decorative piece. These are antique baby rattles, often silver with mother-of-pearl handles, from the late 1900s to early 1900s. The small loops held silk ribbons, or teething rings, and tiny pellets inside the ball made a soft chime. Paris-Deauville Road, 1927. A stalled motor car gets hauled on a horse-drawn flatbed, the brief overlap of the horse age and the car age. Early roadside aid used wagons and ramps like this before dedicated tow trucks spread in the 1930s. Woodstock, 1969. Bill Hanley's crew ran miles of cable for a custom-towered PA that could reach a crowd of more than 400,000. Built in days on a dairy farm, this tangle powered 3 days of music through rain and mud. Texas, 1953. A family-raised lioness named Blondie walks a neighborhood route with a child. Exotic pets were once legal in many places and even appeared at fairs. Later, animal welfare rules and licensing tightened, making scenes like this a snapshot of another era. Tokyo, 1973. A girl in a cotton yukata pauses on a shopping street while her rabbit explores on a leash. Small pets fit city life in Japan, and festival days often saw children in yukata bring along turtles, beetles, or even rabbits. 1950s America. Car hop servers on roller skates rushed burgers and root beer to curbside trays at drive-ins. Skates cut wait times and boosted tips until intercoms and drive-through lanes in the 1970s replaced most curb service. Bell's 1875 Gallows telephone prototype used a vibrating iron reed and electromagnet over a drum-like resonator to turn sound into changing current, and back again. That proof of concept showed speech could ride a wire, paving the way to Bell's 1876 telephone patent and the first intelligible call. Black Hill's gold fever turned Deadwood from tents to a bustling boomtown in a single year, drawing thousands of prospectors after 1876. By 1877, banks, newspapers, and ore buyers lined Main Street as federal surveys, and the coming railroad organized the rush. 12-year-old Tessie Sposato works beside her mother doing attic piecework, the hidden engine of New York's tenement economy in 1911. That year's reform wave, spurred by investigations and the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, helped push the city towards safer workplaces and limits on child labor. Halifax, 1912. Archive footage from the pier where the bodies found after the wreck of the Titanic were taken, the historical chronicle of the city and its role in the events of that time. Student oil lamp from the late 1800s with a side oil reservoir and etched glass shade built as a wall sconce. The side tank balanced the lamp and reduced shadows on the desk for reading. Akron, Ohio, 1966. Goodyear unveils a 40-foot Superman balloon built for the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. A local boy stands by during test inflation, showing the scale before it went to New York. Tourists ride a wooden boat on Echo River inside Mammoth Cave, Kentucky in 1891, guided by lantern light. Mammoth Cave is the world's longest cave system, with over 400 miles of passages mapped today. Japan, 1925. A family sits under blankets beside the wreckage of their home after a strong earthquake. Rebuilding in the following years pushed safer designs across quake-prone regions. Manual dexterity test box used in neuropsychology. The carved bowl held about 25 small keys, each matching a different slot. Users inserted and turned keys in the random keyholes to measure fine motor control and speed. New York City, 1957. A full-scale U.S. Army Redstone missile stood inside Grand Central Terminal during a public technology exhibit. The display highlighted the rocket family that soon powered early United States space missions. Colorado Springs, 1880s. Students and families crowd onto a McLaughlin stagecoach during a school picnic. Coaches like this carried mail and passengers along Front Range routes before rail and cars arrived. Shirt stud for a formal dress shirt, used instead of buttons on the front. The domed top is glass or stone, and the pivoting bar passes through 2 holes to lock it. Cape Denison, Antarctica, 1912. Members of Douglas Mawson's Australasian Antarctic expedition shave inside their hut after months on the ice. The site is one of the windiest places on Earth, with katabatic gusts often above 120 miles per hour. Elizabeth Taylor shows the 33.19-carat Krupp diamond that Richard Burton bought for her in 1968. It was later renamed the Elizabeth Taylor Diamond and sold at auction in 2011 for $8.8 million. New York City, November 1965. Bob Dylan leaves Andy Warhol's factory carrying the gifted silkscreen Double Elvis from 1963. The canvas did not fit in the car, so his crew held it on the roof while driving through Manhattan. Cannes, 1953. Kirk Douglas talks with friends on the beach while young Brigitte Bardot rests nearby during the film festival. This early photo came before Bardot's breakout and shows the casual side of Cannes in the 1950s. PLZT automatic darkening goggles for aircrew, developed in the 1950s and 1960s, used special ceramic to change tint almost instantly. Sensors triggered the lenses during sudden intense flashes to protect vision in flight. 1957. Sophia Loren and Frank Sinatra arrive at a Hollywood event in formal wear. Loren was entering American films that year, while Sinatra was a top recording and movie star. Novelty pocket lighter disguised as a Campbell's soup can, common in mid-20th century souvenirs. The top pops open to reveal the lighter mechanism. 1910s. Charlie Chaplin paints a small mustache on young Douglas Fairbanks Jr. during an early studio visit. It captures two future Hollywood figures before Fairbanks Jr. became a star. 1953. Soviet linguist Yuri Knorozov holds his Siamese cat while working on the breakthrough that decoded the Maya script. In a playful note, he credited his cat Asya for assistance in his research. Switzerland, 1978. Charlie Chaplin's coffin was recovered in a field 10 weeks after a theft. Police arrested the culprits, and the coffin was reburied with stronger security. Nevada, 1867. A miner works the Gould and Curry claim on the Comstock lode near Virginia City, chipping ore in a timbered tunnel. The Comstock was America's first major silver strike and fueled a boom that reshaped the West. Aerial view of the Pacific Coliseum under construction in Vancouver, 1967, with the seating bowl taking shape. It opened in 1968 and later hosted figure skating and short track at the 2010 Winter Games. Jacques Cousteau with his family in 1944, wearing his French Navy uniform. That year, he tested the new Aqualung and began filming underwater, work that launched modern ocean exploration. New York City, 1917. Workers build the wooden USS Recruit in Union Square, a full-size land battleship for Navy recruiting. It served as a public training and exhibit center until it was taken down in 1920. Walter Owen Bentley created his own luxury car company in 1919 and shook the world with the powerful Bentley 412-liter in 1927. Bentley's cars dominated endurance races like Le Mans, making him an icon of British engineering. Marlene Dietrich and Erich Maria Remarque started their romance in 1937 and shared the stormy years of exile while Europe was on the edge of war. In 1939, Dietrich revived her Hollywood stardom as Remarque began a new life in America, both forever linked by legend and mystery. The French Tissot gas mask, made by the same company known today for watches, was a breakthrough design that kept soldiers safer from poison gas during World War I. Tissot's innovation allowed fresh air to flow over the eyepieces, preventing fogging and making the mask much easier to wear in deadly trenches,